Part 27. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 267. Piaolu's figure appeared in the square. The pile of corpses in the square had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a large burnt mark. Piaolu's eyes swept over the place, and then he found his own body under the sculpture in the small square. Pet. Pixia was curled up there shivering, no longer feeling crazy like before. Pelu walked over, stretched out his hand to hug Paixiu, and placed one hand on the top of Paixiu's head. Then, some pictures appeared in Paixiu's eyes. These pictures came from Paixiu's memory. You stepped on the edge of the rules of the team to attack my pet. I really underestimated you. Even if there is a punishment according to the rules of the team, I will bear it. I worked hard to feed it with my own essence and blood, but you directly destroy its divine beast bloodline. You are really good. Piaolu's hand pressed gently. The head of Pixio in his arm sank directly, his limbs trembled for an instant, and then he lost all vitality and died. In order for this ferocious beast to inherit the bloodline of the mythical beast and feed it for such a long time, it can be said that Piaolu spent a huge price and poured a lot of blood. Now the bloodline of this pet mythical beast has been destroyed because it is not a purebred mythical beast. Reasons, so there is no hope of recovery at all. For Pili Tower, it also means that all value has been lost. Just destroy anything worthless. But how to extinguish the inner anger? Even if I don't do other things, I still have to find you first. A hexagonal light appeared at the foot of the Thunder Tower, and one of himself appeared in every corner. Immediately, a total of 7 identical Thunder Towers dispersed and rushed in different directions. They would not give up until Subai was found. Posture. Not long after, Yan Huiyang and Lan Lin, who had returned with a peaceful attitude, also appeared in the square. Yan Huiyang walked under the sculpture, reached out and grabbed Pixio's tail, lifted the body up and shook it. It's true. Even if it is useless, it is still the pet that I have kept for so long, and I don't miss it at all. Lan Lin didn't look at the Pixio, but looked at the place where the corpses were originally stacked, but now there was nothing. Aren't you and him the same? Perfectionists. That's who I used to be. Yan Huiyang retorted, then reached out and scratched his now greasy hair. How can I be as romantic now as I was back then? Quickly turning from one extreme to the other, from a playboy who is extremely well dressed to a completely bad old man, wholeheartedly performing the image he should be performing now. Lao Yan, this is really a bit fake. Yan Huiyang smacked his lips and threw away Pixio's body without further refutation. That boy Subai took care of this Pixio. Don't I think it's strange? That boy had a lot of miscellaneous things on him. However, the 3 of us had just worked hard for most of the night to knock down the corpse. Gone. This is not something Subai can eat. If he can eat the corpses of the same kind like those cat people, then I really don't dare to see him again, and I am a little trembling. He has a pet, a cat person caught at random in this story world. This is really generosity. He used all the corpses we worked so hard to kill as a favor. Actually, essentially, there is no difference. Lan Lin walked to a pillar in the square, looked at her hair in the mirror, and began to take care of it. Pelu has been completely angered. Aren't you afraid that he will find him before you do and kill him? Yan Huiyang teased. Lan Lin looked at Yan Huiyang with a half smile. It was unintentional. If there is a surprise, that would be the best. If not, there is no need to be so disappointed. When I entered the story world this time, you first teamed up with Piaolu to trick me, and now you are tricking Piaolu again. Lan Lin, although I know that stabbing a friend in the back is a standard move in the story world, I really don't know. Why is the utilitarianism so strong this time? Moreover, where is your bottom line this time? Piaolu is pouring his anger on Subai now, but I know that he must know in his heart that it is you who is arranging it. So what? Don't push the two of us into a hurry. It's very dangerous for you. Although it doesn't sound good for two grown men to attack a woman together, rabbits bite when they get anxious. Meow. In the distance, a big cat man appeared and sprinted over. The ground seemed to shake due to its running. Yan Huiyong flashed his figure, went over and slapped the cat man away, and then stepped on it. He regarded the cat man who had just smelled the fishy smell but came late as the person to whom I can vent my frustrations. However, Yan Huiyong didn't see that behind him, red silk threads were constantly surrounding Lan Lin's fingertips. That is the line of cause and effect. So hot. So hot. It hurt so much. Sudbai's whole body was like a soldering iron. Sweat continued to flow out and wet the sheets. At the same time, the temperature in the bedroom continued to rise. When it rose to a certain temperature, it began to drop rapidly. The high temperature disappeared, and even there was no temperature at all, and frost began to appear in the room. After repeated cycles, the room was now wet. At this time, he has entered the final and most difficult step of refining the true blood of Pixiu. Catwoman was still sitting in the living room, looking at her parents' wedding photos. At this time, there was no foreign matter in her heart. She was completely immersed in her own mentality. As everyone knows, although she is no longer swallowing, her strength is still there. It is constantly growing, because cat people are dying in the city at any time, and their corpses begin to automatically incinerate, turning into the purest power that only living cat people can absorb and actively integrate into it. This may be the note set before the terror broadcast. For example, it will be turned on when the number of cat people drops sharply to a certain level. In order to pursue the so-called storytelling, horror broadcasts really put a lot of effort into it. Finally, around dusk, Sudbai's eyes trembled slightly, his eyelids opened, his vision was blurred, and his whole body felt dizzy. He struggled to get up from the bed, and Sudbai heard a cat meow. Meow. This cat meow is very familiar. It is not the meow of those cat people, but an auspicious sound. Sudbai looked at the end of his bed and saw Ji Xiang lying there. You damn cat, why are you here to join in the fun? Sudbai crawled over subconsciously, only to find that Ji Xiang's figure dissipated and disappeared. He hit his head with one hand and said, it seems that the side effects haven't completely ended yet. There are actually phantoms and auditory hallucinations. Sudbai thought this was quite normal and didn't take it too seriously. Daddy, Daddy. Sudbai turned his head and looked at the head of his bed. The little guy was sitting there clapping at Sudbai. You come too. Sudbai shook his head, there was nothing he could do, his son was here, even if it was an illusion, he had to go and hug him. However, when Sudbai climbed over again, he found that his son had also disappeared. Oh shit. Sudbai started to hammer his head, obviously a little annoyed. Just hallucinate, why is the time so short? Standing up from the bed, Sudbai still felt a little drowsy, but he was much better than before. His body was not so numb and weak. His physical condition was very good, and there seemed to be something extra in his blood. Originally, when Sudbai was in close combat, his basic physical output was supported by the zombie state. The vampire state had strong survivability, but if he wanted to truly fight back against the enemy, he had to switch to the zombie state. But now, Sudbai feels that the fusion of Pixiogen after losing blood, his attack power in the vampire state has also increased a lot. As for the specific increase, we will have to wait for a chance to try it before we know. Beware of people like you. Beware of people like you. Beware of people like you. I don't know why, but these words without any emotional tendency kept ringing in Sudbai's mind. This is Sudbai's own voice, and it awakens some memory fragments that Sudbai may have ignored or forgotten. It's a bit like a sixth sense, or something called induction. Maybe you think this is very important, or it may be a sudden whim. Especially for Sudbai now, he is in a semi-trance state, so it is easier for him to have random thoughts. Sudbai picked up the unfinished Coke from the bedside table and drank it all in one breath. At this time, the whole person was finally freed from the dazed state, his thinking finally returned to normal and clear, and the previous state of being distracted was finally over. At this time, Sudbai began to think about where that sentence came from. In short, it was closely related to him, otherwise he would not remember it or say that he suddenly remembered it. After a while, a clue finally appeared in Sudbai's mind, and the memory was finally recalled. That was when I sent Jixiang back to Chengdu from Jiangsu. Outside the house, I had just sent Jixiang into the house, that is, returned it to Liqi. When I was about to take a taxi back to my home in Chengdu, Liqi gave me a gift at that time. Sent a WeChat message. Be careful of people like you. Why do you think of this again? I'm really a little nervous. In Sudbai's view, the meaning of Lizhafa's words was to remind him to be careful of people like him in the next story world. The result was indeed a motto. In that story world, everyone who is the same as himself is an experiencer. The director is the real murderer and the most dangerous element. This is something that no one had thought of before. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 268. There was a small independent bathroom in the bedroom. Sudbai walked in. There was actually a faint smell of perfume and some girls' supplies in the bathroom. Thinking about how a cute and sweet little loli started to eat people and turned into, seeing that look, Sudbai couldn't help but feel a sigh of relief in his heart. God wants to destroy the world, but not everyone in the city is a bad person. Even if most people become cat people, it is not their choice. However, the cost of doing good is often too high, and God probably wants to save trouble. It would be much easier to just build a Noah's Ark and then reshuffle the cards for destruction. Sudbai picked up a handful of water and slapped it on his face, and Sudbai felt a sense of coolness. He picked up the girl's towel and wiped his face and hands, took a deep breath, walked out of the bedroom and came to the living room. In the living room, Catwoman was still sitting on the sofa motionless. Her thoughts were like a flood. Once the hole was broken, it would be difficult to stop it, especially in the past period. Catwoman had almost completely lost her thoughts. The memory has become a Catman who only knows how to fight ferociously. Now with the improvement of his strength and life level, the previously forgotten or dusty memories have come back to life. With the flood of thoughts, it is difficult to stop in a short time, especially it's what I'm thinking about now, and it's all the things I've lost that I need to remember. Family, friends, and your past life. Sudbai took a cup and poured a glass of water from the water dispenser. Then he sat on the sofa opposite, crossing his legs. Young Master surrealized his conscience and did not disturb Catwoman's thoughts. However, Sudbai soon discovered a problem, that is, the Catwoman in front of him, even though she was in a daze, her aura was still growing, and her body was constantly undergoing subtle changes. This is because as the life level increases, the body begins to be further optimized and improved, making the body more adaptable to the world, or more integrated into the world. For ordinary people, this process is long, and may even take hundreds or thousands of years to change from generation to generation. Is she enlightening? Sudbai wondered. I had read some ancient myths and stories before, and they talked about how one could die in the morning after hearing the Tao. Once enlightened, one's strength would suddenly increase. However, Sudbai felt that it would be nonsense to say that Catwoman was enlightening. Standing up, Sudbai walked to the balcony and finally discovered the reason. There was a constant stream of red light mist floating in from the outside, and then naturally integrated into Catwoman's body. As soon as his mind changed, Sudbai almost understood it, and he couldn't help but feel that the setting of the horror broadcast was indeed very clever. It prevented the listeners from wanting to destroy the one who led to the final birth of the world or call those cat people who were not as strong as expected. Powerful possibility. However, Subai felt even more jealous in his heart. Before, you could directly evolve and strengthen yourself by eating the corpses of the same kind, but now you can just sit there in a daze, comparing people to each other, which is really annoying. Catwoman turned her head and looked at Subai. It seemed that her days had ended, but her eyes were still a little hazy, and tears fell down. "I am cold," Catwoman muttered. At this time, her voice and tone really sounded like a pitiful and helpless girl. Subai opened his arms and made a hug. "Come on, brother, give me a hug." Catwoman got up from the sofa with tears in her eyes, rushed into Subai's arms, hugged Subai tightly, and felt the warmth from Subai's arms. The picture is so beautiful. Slave owners and slaves cling to each other for warmth and protect each other's hearts in the same helpless environment. However, next moment, Catwoman knelt on the ground in pain, her palms spread out, and there was an extremely long white nail on one finger, exuding an aura that felt very dangerous. SHHH, the hard part is now soft. The provocative foreplay is good, high score, but unfortunately, I really don't like this kind of fresh part. It always feels very fake. Subai reached out and patted Catwoman's tender face. "Remember, next time, before you prepare to take action, you must first learn to restrain your murderous intent. You are stronger than me, and you are much stronger than me now. Unfortunately, your experience is still too lacking." Catwoman sat on the ground. When Subai stopped stimulating the ring on her finger, Catwoman leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window very calmly. She was not distressed or angry, but instead seemed to go through a process after doing something habitually. Above the starry sky, Noah's Ark is still sailing alone and quietly. On the deck, they repented day and night and sang praises constantly, all just to cleanse their hearts. Those who could not withstand the hardships and tests of their souls had been crucified on the cross and became a symbol to serve as a warning to others. Fortunately, I repent 24 hours a day, 20 hours a day, but I also have 4 hours at my disposal. During this time, I can eat something and sleep. Of course, there can't be big fish or meat on Noah's Ark. There was caviar and fine wine, and there was pot after pot of mashed potatoes, just for fun, but in large quantities. Liao Qiu held his own plate and ate his mashed potatoes with a spoon. There were ordinary people on Noah's Ark who were responsible for cleaning and operating it. Most of these ordinary people were believers who had been completely brainwashed. Of course, recently, Liao Qiu also saw several listeners who had completely collapsed but did not die and were completely brainwashed. They also wore monks' clothes and began to become glorious volunteers. There is actually no difference between this kind of person who is alive and dead, because when you leave the story world, the horror broadcast will restore your physical injuries, but will not interfere with your spiritual level at all. This is what many experiencers are lucky, or the reason why they went crazy after leaving the story world is that many listeners suffered from serious mental illness as a result. What can a believer who has been completely brainwashed do even if he returns to the real world alive? Heading into a monastery in the real world to continue worshipping God? Then in the next story world, it is estimated that death will really be inevitable. The lives of the listeners cannot be too much wasted. Many people cherish every minute and look for opportunities to strengthen themselves, but there is no guarantee that they will be in the next story. The world continues to live, let alone those believers. Ye Mole was sitting in front of Liao Qiu. Neither of them took their plates to eat at their seats. Fortunately, Noah only appeared during confession time and not during the precious 4 hours of rest. So there are not too many requirements in these aspects. Every time you sit across from me and eat mashed potatoes with your hands, I feel very appetizing, as if it makes me feel that what I am eating is not the damn potatoes but mutton with my hands. Liao Qiu teased Ye Molei. If you eat too much, it really doesn't taste good, Ye Moli, I said. At this time, Su Qing, who had finished her meal, walked to the deck and sat down not far from Liao Qiu and Ye Mole. She looked withdrawn. Many details could show that this woman was not far away from her inner collapse. Poor woman. Liao Qiu took another mouthful of mashed potatoes and deliberately chewed hard, as if he was really biting into the meat. She can't hold up. Tomorrow's Sunday. In fact, I'm surprised that she can hold on for so long. Not willing to give up on her past is equivalent to always holding on to a stain and constantly accepting the torture from the power of repentance. And for it impact. Ye Mole sucked his fingers and put the dinner plate on the deck. Persistence is also a good thing. It's not a big deal for both of us to let go and give up. Liao Qiu was too lazy to continue eating. There was still half of the food left, so he stood up and poured out the remaining food. Towards the outside of the ship, below, there was no land, only the starry sky. One of the listeners once tried to fly out because he had a magic weapon that could fly for a short time, and then he was suddenly struck by a bolt of lightning in full view of everyone. Directly turned into starry sky fertilizer. Noah's Ark is full of rules, conventional rules. Hey, woman. Liao Qiu greeted Su Qing over there. Su Qing stood there motionless and ignored Liao Qiu. When the conversation failed, Liao Qiu didn't feel too discouraged. He just pointed out of the boat, eliminate the pain, jump down, and then a beautiful lightning will come to embrace you. Su Qing turned her head and looked at Liao Qiu. Liao Qiu shrugged. I'm sick. Su Qing spat out these two words. Liao Qiu smiled coquettishly. She is such a strong woman. No wonder she can become teammates with that lunatic. Do you know Subai? Su Qing looked at Liao Qiu and became slightly interested in talking. That guy left a pool of bodily fluids on my neck. Do you think I know him? Liao Qiu said exaggeratedly. Su Qing looked at Liao Qiu, frowned slightly, and then shook her head. Although he is unique in some aspects, I don't think there is a problem with his orientation in that aspect. The bodily fluids on the neck, that image, is interesting. It's blood. Liao Qiu stretched out. Now, I really envy that guy. Originally, he should also be on the ship. His worries and inner experiences are definitely much more than ours. And it is much more unforgettable than our ups and downs. He even has extreme mental illness himself. If he could be on the ship, when he was being confessed every day, it would really be like a guinea pig being sent directly to the electric torture rack and being violently beaten. The scene would definitely be very beautiful, especially that guy when I was suffering here. Seeing that he might be sleeping and eating cans from the convenience store leisurely down there, I felt really unbalanced. Yes, it's beautiful. Su Qing also agreed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 269. Is there anything to eat at home? Subai walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and found that there was nothing in the refrigerator except some drinks. It is estimated that this family did not make fire at home before. After asking, there was no reply. Subai walked out of the kitchen and saw Catwoman standing motionless on the balcony. This time she was motionless, which was different from the previous time when she was looking at her parents' wedding photos in a daze. Her body was obviously tense, as if she had encountered a threat. Naturally took on this posture of being ready to counterattack at any time. Subai walked over and stood on the balcony. There was some wind on the balcony and it was still a bit cold. What are you looking at? Subai asked. Catwoman shook her head and didn't answer. This is not your style. Subai smiled. Shouldn't you be thinking about how to kill me and get out of my control now? Catwoman's eyes began to become hollow, and her whole person fell into an ethereal state. Her feet began to float off the ground, and she slowly said, I can feel the call from my bloodline, which is guiding me to do something, and keeps urging me. Time is running out. What are you calling for? Subai took out a cigarette, put it in his hand and flicked it gently. Death or continuing to devour, the only two choices in my life. Catwoman turned to Subai. I can't continue to waste time, otherwise, I will live up to my fate. Fate, Subai put his hands on the balcony railing. What a bloody word, what a cliched plot. At the same time, Subai silently despised the horror broadcast in his heart. In the end, did the plot still have to continue to be led by such clichés? In the sky, the invisible Noah's Ark, and on the ground, it seems very intense, but in fact it is just an undercurrent. At least Subai has not suffered a big crisis now, nor has he felt a big threat, because a few days ago Lan Lin and several others were in front. 8 breaths are already coming to me, because they can feel my state, and can even touch my heart. They think that I am weak, so I don't deserve to continue to live. I should contribute my strength for the continuation of our race. The emotions I just felt when I was sitting on the sofa in the living room looking at photos of my parents, they can also feel it, because the number of our ethnic group has become smaller and smaller. Now, there may only be about 10 left. When an ethnic group only has this, when we are together a little bit, the mutual feelings will be particularly strong and clear. Do you think you are a human or a cat? Subai lit up the cigarette and blew out a smoke ring. To be honest, Subai did not particularly sympathize with Catwoman, nor did he like Catwoman. Catwoman was created by her own whim. As for dealing with her like this and how to use her, Subai didn't think about it. Of course, it was difficult to think of it. Should he ask Catwoman to kill Lan Lin and the others? It seems too unrealistic. Isn't it ridiculous to ask this question now? Regardless of whether I think I'm a human or I think I'm a cat, we are both targets for extermination. You, and those like you, what you have to do in the end is not to kill the last remaining few of us. Kill. Don't include me, I'm just a fool. Catwoman touched her chest and said, is this also a case of soy sauce? They came to you together, 8 of them to kill you together. It's 7, Catwoman corrected. But you just said there are 8 breaths. One of them wasn't coming for me. Who are you coming for? Subai asked, and then said, okay, there is no need to ask this, so should we continue now? There are some things that cannot be escaped. If you continue to escape, it will make no sense to yourself or the so-called ethnic group. You and I are different. Although in my eyes, you and I are both human beings. But I am one of the people destined to be exterminated, and you are not. The hair on Catwoman's body began to grow. She grasped the railing tightly with both hands and bent her body slightly, like a fully drawn bow, ready to go. Although it's hard for me to understand your idiotic religious fanaticism, which is similar to that of a blood group, are you going to leave me now? Subai put his hand on Catwoman's shoulder. You are me slave, I am your master. I can't protect you anymore. If I stay, you have to face 8 people. If I leave, you only have to face 1. You are a very smart and extreme person, but by no means a stupid person. I leaving now and fending for yourself is the best protection for you. If you don't believe me, you can kill me now and freeze my heart to death. 8 or 1 doesn't mean much to me. I can't beat any of them anyway. Subai shrugged. This is a fact. It is estimated that the rest of the audience in the city who did not go to Noah's Ark are left. There is not much left. Subai can't handle Catwoman now. It is really difficult for Subai to face the rest of them. This is your problem. I have to go. In fact, I still have a certain chance of surviving and becoming the last one. Any life, whether it is a human or a cat, has a way of struggling to survive. Instinctively, I am going now because I want to give it a try and see if I can get a chance, or at least let out a shout. Scream. Subai suddenly couldn't help but laugh. This IQ has improved so fast. At the beginning, I only knew how to drink blood and eat the corpses of the same kind, but now I can almost catch up with the great thinkers. I am leaving. Catwoman's body was ejected directly, turning into a red stream of light and rushing to the east, which is the city center. Subai rubbed his fingers on the ring and licked his lips. I know you didn't tell me the whole truth, but I found that your wisdom has grown so much that I'm really surprised. Subai moved his finger away from the ring. Subai did not stimulate the ring. Catwoman, she was just a plaything of his. What would happen to her in the end, Subai didn't know or think clearly. At this moment, Subai saw a person appearing on the street below the balcony. The person was raising his head and looking up. That person is Piaolu. Subai stretched out his hand and said, "Hi, long time no see. I miss you so much." Piaolu smiled and nodded, his face was gentle and calm. However, the balcony where Subai was lying on his hands collapsed in an instant. Subai quickly grabbed the pipe on one side with one hand and the whole person did not fall. However, before Subai had time to turn around and go to the balcony next door, a strong wind came. Coming from behind him. "Do you know how much it cost me to let that idiot have the blood of Pixiu?" Piaolu appeared behind Subai before, forming a seal with his hands. Two barriers appeared. The middle point of collision and friction was where Subai was. Subai felt huge pressure coming from up and down, left, right and front. He immediately closed his eyes and turned into a pool of Yinhong's blood, flowing out. "Trash, what else will you do besides running away?" Piaolu opened his palms, and when the aperture appeared, it spread out, and the silver snake danced wildly, constantly stimulating and whipping Subai's blood. Subai's body quickly condensed, and his whole body was burnt black and scarred. In the face of Piaolu's many methods, Subai's many methods are indeed a bit insignificant, and they feel a bit unworthy of the stage. "Do you think you have circumvented the rules of team formation just by attacking my pet?" Piaolu snorted coldly, and a hexagonal star appeared under his feet, spreading out and turning into a cage, imprisoning Subai. "But, sometimes, if you want to do something, even if you pay the price, it is acceptable. I don't believe that if I kill you, the terrorist broadcast will directly wipe me out. You ruined half a year of my hard work, do you know?" Subai tried to grab the cage with both hands, but a terrifying energy wave shook him away. Immediately afterwards, Subai raised two Hellfire shotguns and pulled the trigger at the cage. However, the barrage of the Hellfire shotguns was directly reflected back and hit Subai himself. Boom! Boom! Subai's body suddenly became tattered, and the bones were visible in some places. For the first time, he tasted the feeling of the Hellfire shotgun forced on his body. "Trash, do you think you are great? Do you think you are lucky? Who do you think you are? I will tell you something here today. In the audience circle, if you pretend to be B when you have no ability, you will die miserably." Piao Tower started to form seals again, and a whirlpool appeared behind the cage. There was a terrible tearing and dividing force in the whirlpool, and the cage was constantly being swallowed by the whirlpool. "You retard, you know very well in your heart who the person who is plotting against you is. You don't dare to go to her, so you come to me to vent your anger. Aren't you also deceiving yourself and others?" Subai, who was in tatters and embarrassment, laughed loudly and taunted. "She is her, and you are you. Do you think a piece of trash like you is worthy of competing with her?" Subai suddenly realized that what Piaolu said was indeed correct. For example, the fat man, the monk, and Gyatso were scheming with each other, but everyone would sit together afterwards and pretend that nothing had happened, because everyone was close in strength, and they were not as strong as each other. As a last resort, he was unwilling to break up completely. Obviously, who was behind this matter, and Piaolu also smelled it, but he pretended not to know, so his anger was poured more into Subai. Body. "Okay, come on." Subai opened his arms, golden veins appeared, the newly fused Pixiu blood was stimulated, the body swelled slightly, and the breath became more solid, and then, Subai was like a ferocious beast. He rushed out and stabbed him vertically and horizontally. Subai knew that there was a huge gap in strength, but he was still ready to fight. Boom! The cage collapsed, and Subai actually rushed out with his own physical strength, which made Subai a little unbelievable. Piaolu's eyes narrowed and he started to form seals again. "I'll paralyze you!" Subai shouted loudly, swung his fist down, and hit the light shield in front of Piaolu directly. The light shield shattered directly, and Piaolu was hit and fell downwards. After landing, his body still remained sliding some distance. At this moment, Subai finally understood that the thunder tower in front of him was just a paper tiger. He had been on the defensive and was being beaten passively. He really scared himself. He has a problem now. He is not as strong as he thought. In fact, he, who has just merged with the true blood of Pixiu, can crush Piaolu purely by relying on the strength of his physical body. He uses magic to strengthen his physical body, which is not an advantage. A stream of blood flowed from the corner of Piaolu's mouth, and then he looked around and murmured, "Damn it, how could it be that my other 6 clones haven't come yet? They can't be so slow." Previously, in order to find Subai, Piaolu separated out 6 clones. This one is his true self. However, just now, he had already signaled in his heart that his 6 clones would return, but now they are still missing. His current strength, it is only 1/7 of its peak strength, and even under many influences, it may only be 1/10 of its strength. Subai also jumped down from the building, and a layer of dust was splashed after landing. He clenched his fists and walked out, staring at Piaolu, who was not as confident as before, with a hint of red in his eyes. Word by word. "Dad will teach you something today." In the audience circle, if you are not strong enough, don't pretend to be, otherwise you will die miserably. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 270. On a tall building, 3 identical thunder towers stood there, their bodies swaying, drowsy and delirious. Around them, there were cyclones circling sideways, suppressing their aura, and at the same time, suppressing them. Their connection and sanity. Above them, Yan Huiyang sat cross-legged, his body constantly rising and falling, and the edges and corners of his face were covered with sweat. Clearly, he was tired. Even if there are only 3 clones of Pili Tower in front of them, trying to suppress them will require a huge amount of consumption and price. Piaolu has 1 body and 7 incarnations, and 1 body has 6 clones. Counted individually, it is not as simple as 1/7 of the strength, it may be 1/10 or even lower. Therefore, Yan Huiyang is like catching a chicken, they caught them one by one and trapped them here. Needless to say, it's hard work. On the top of the building opposite, Lan Lin's skirt was fluttering. Behind her, 3 identical towers were standing there precariously. However, Lan Lin seemed much more relaxed than Yan Huiyang. After all, Yan Huiyang was a big boss, relies on pure physical strength. Lan Lin does have more methods than Yan Huiyang, so it is much easier to deal with these things. "Will I have this day too?" Yan Huiyang opened his eyes and looked at Lan Lin opposite. "I never thought before that even if you feed Pixiu from Pixiu, you actually plan to do it too. Take it and feed it. Next time, is it my turn? Since you are worried that it might be your turn next, why do you still want to help me?" Lan Lin looked at Yan Huiyang with a playful expression. "I have to find an opportunity to trick him. Who told him to trick me so badly in the first place that I had to hide in a woman's belly?" Yan Huiyang gave a reason for this. Lan Lin smiled and said nothing more. Yan Huiyang also closed his eyes and concentrated on suppressing Piaolu's clone. In fact, there is already a tacit understanding between the 2 people. Boom! Subai punched out, and Piaolu tried to use the barrier to resist, but Subai directly used his body to resist the pressure of the barrier. He rushed over like a wild bull, and was strangled with streaks on his body. He didn't care about the scars, and punched Piaolu on the shoulder again. Piaolu was thrown away, and one arm was directly dislocated and deformed. Facing Subai's completely unreasonable approach, Piaolu was suppressed and the anger in his heart kept rising. He was hit again and again by the garbage he called him again and again, which was obviously too much for his arrogance. However, reality is reality. The more he fights, the more experienced Subai is. He relies entirely on his own recovery ability to resist Piaolu's barrier and other magical attacks, and then relies on his own strength to simply attack Piaolu's body. Over and over again, Piaolu's body has begun to shake. Although he deliberately spreads the damage throughout his body every time he takes a blow, trying to maintain his sustainable fighting ability as much as possible, he cannot withstand so many turns. Hard blast. My clone has been blocked. Someone is framing me. You don't want to be a knife in someone else's hand, right? Piaolu opened his mouth and shouted. His teeth were full of blood, and his whole person looked very ferocious. Emotionally, it was actually a bit hysterical. You are you and she is her. Now you can't even beat me. What qualifications do you have to compare with her? Piao Tower. Finally, Subai was ready to kill this time. He got close and a hexagonal star glow condensed in front of Piaolu again. Subai leaned forward and knocked away the star glow, and then hugged Piaolu's neck with both hands, smashing the tower down hard. Buzz. Piaolu's head was smashed into the ground, and blood flowed out. Subai did not hold back, nor did he hesitate at all. He raised his knee and hit Piaolu's lower abdomen hard. A loud muffled sound was heard. Then, Subai hugged Piaolu's legs with both hands, pulled onions on dry land, and directly the thunder tower was lifted up and hit the hard ground again. Whirring whirring. After finishing these beatings, Subai stood on the spot, breathing heavily. At this time, he was tired from beating others. However, Piaolu staggered to his feet again. His whole body was covered in blood, his hair was messy, and his eyes were wandering. He was already in a state of confusion, but he still raised his hand. Stop fighting. I'll give you whatever you want. Believe me, I can give you a price that will shock you. Subai took a few more breaths, and two fangs appeared at the corners of his mouth. What a pity, I don't care about your things, I will kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, Subai rushed towards Piaolu again. Piaolu crossed his hands, a starlight gathered under his feet again, and his body began to float. It seemed that he was planning to take the opportunity to escape. Subai jumped up, grabbed one of Piaolu's legs, and threw Piaolu heavily to the ground again. After this time, Piaolu finally lay on the ground without getting up. He didn't know whether it was because he didn't have the strength to get up or because he understood that even if he got up, it would be difficult to escape, so he simply accepted his fate. Run away, keep jumping, Subai shouted while kicking the tower with his feet. Piaolu closed his eyes, as if he had simply sealed off his spiritual consciousness to prevent himself from suffering this kind of insult. He was truly an indestructible figure. Subai pursed his lips. Most of his body's strength had been squandered in the battle just now, and now he could feel some weak signs of fatigue. At the same time, it was difficult for him to resist the blood of a being of this level. Squatting down and looking at Piaolu's neck, Subai licked his tongue and then bit it. Buzz. 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 3 muffled sounds came from the rooftops of the buildings on both sides. A total of 6 clones belonging to Piaolu disappeared in the moment just now. Yan Huiyong opened his eyes with a solemn expression on his face. Have you really fallen? There are sections of silk thread surrounding Lan Lin's fingertips, but for some reason, they appear a little mottled at this time. When the thunder tower falls, the avatar disappears along with the disappearance of the main body. This is a normal thing, and it is also what I hope. She saw something, but for some reason, she felt a haze in her heart. Yan Huiyang's figure directly crossed the distance between the two buildings and appeared next to Lan Lin. Next, is it my turn? Lan Lin suddenly squatted down, holding her knees with both hands, like a helpless girl, and timidly said, I just felt the fear from fate. Scared. I'm very scared, Lan Lin admitted. I could sense everything clearly before, but just now, those lines started to get messed up. A strong person, when she was about to take a look at the cause and effect, actually showed such a reaction. Obviously, she must have encountered some kind of fear. This fear may have surpassed life and death, and even the two were not at all. Can't be compared. But everything has been done. It's too late to stop now. Yan Huiyang looked at Lan Lin. I was severely injured by you and Piaolu at the beginning and had to escape into the woman's belly to find a chance to recover. It must have been your plan from the beginning, because if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have met that guy named Subai. Lan Lin didn't answer, she just squatted there and stared at the ground silently. No one knew what she was thinking in her mind at this time. Maybe she was not thinking about anything, just letting her thoughts go, because if she didn't think about it, she wouldn't be able to think about it. You will feel that fear. Now that I've started doing it, let's keep doing it. I also want to see what it would be like to really enter that realm, so that it can be a reference for me. This time, you plotted against me and Pai Lai Lu. I have already been hit hard once, and Pai Lai Lu has sacrificed himself. If you don't continue, Pai Lai Lu will also be angry under Jiquan. Look, you raise your head and look, Pai Lai Lu is cheering you up in the sky, smiling at you, he is encouraging you. I know him, even if he is dead, even if he is no longer here, I hope you can continue happily. Live on. Haha. Lan Lin curled up into a smile and spat, Old Yan, you are still as shameless as before. After saying that, Lan Lin stood up and said, long nights and many dreams, this is what I'm most worried about, especially when you feel that you have the ability to see many things clearly but suddenly find that it is pitch black again, as if you have forgotten that you are there. In the past many years and time, I have actually been unable to see anything and have been walking in the dark. Now, I have lost a lot of courage and self-confidence than before. A blue light appeared around Lan Lin's body. Before leaving, she looked at Yan Huiyang, I still need you to stop the Catman's matter. At least it won't take much until my matter is over. Time. Yan Huiyang nodded, don't worry. Immediately, Lan Lin's figure disappeared, and Yan Huiyang's eyes became deeper and deeper. Wow! The bathroom door was opened, and Subai walked out while wiping his hair and wrapped in a bath towel. There is a woman sitting on the sofa in the living room. Lan Lin's eyes were as smooth as ever. When Subai walked out, they lingered on him for a moment. I'm still taking a shower. I'm very interested. Lan Lin reached out and picked up a grid of oranges on the coffee table, put it to the tip of her nose and smelled it. I know a woman is coming to see me tonight, so I need to clean myself up first and get ready for work. After saying that, Subai threw two things on the coffee table. I used to have a shy roommate in the university dormitory, and a roommate asked him, do you like Dulé, Si, or Jiashi Bang? His answer was, which one is more delicious? Haha, you choose one. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 271. You're quite calm. Lan Lin sat firmly on the sofa, crossing her legs, revealing a small section of her smooth and round calves. They were just the right size. If they were more, they would look more coquettish, and if they were less, they would no longer be so beautiful. A smart woman's first instinct and performance is to show and explore her most beautiful side, maybe not to please others, but just to please herself. When Subai dropped the two condoms, Lanlin had no special reaction. Although she squatted down and hugged her knees in front of Yan Huiyang before, like a helpless poor girl, that was just a temporary catharsis of emotions, and the catharsis was over. Afterwards, she was still the same Lanlin. I've always been so heartless. Subai walked to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of Fanta, opened the lid, and took a sip. At this moment, Lanlin's eyes suddenly changed, her figure disappeared on the sofa, and appeared directly in front of Subai. Subai's whole body was frozen, and his body floated and was stuck to the wall. How is it possible on your body? Lanlin's expression looked very angry. She always showed her cold side to others, and it would never be possible for her to show such obvious anger. Even though he was suppressed tightly and had no ability to resist at all, Subai still looked very calm. Especially Subai's eyes looked at Lanlin with provocation. Come on, don't you like to pretend to be calm? Don't you like to pretend to be noble and cool? Even a rich second generation like me doesn't pretend like this, but you're still pretending in front of me. Subai's eyes looked to the left, then to the right. What he was looking at was his arms, or, what he was looking at himself. Then, with a smile, he said, I suddenly felt that the bloodline of Pixiu was not very suitable for me. The brute force fighting method was too inconsistent with my requirements for fighting art, so I forced the true blood of Pixiu out of my body. Because of this, I went in to take a shower just now because my whole body was covered in blood. I can't face a beautiful lady like you and just be dripping with blood, even if I'm covered in stinky sweat, right? Lanlin's breathing continued to get heavier. The fear seemed to come back again. The loss of control over fate was like a captain who had lost control of the rudder and could no longer control the return of the deck beneath his feet. Confused, panicked, afraid. All kinds of negative emotions kept attacking Lanlin. She was naturally not afraid of Subai. Subai had nothing to be afraid of Lanlin. What Lanlin was afraid of was just the fate that had become confusing again. Just as Western technology was introduced into the country in the late Qing dynasty, many officials or wealthy gentry with a good family also bought an astronomical telescope to try it out. As a result, many people were suppressed and couldn't bear it because they knew their own insignificance after seeing the starry sky. Committed suicide. Originally, Lanlin thought that she had entered karma for the first time and that she only needed the last crucial step, or that she only needed the further blessing of her body and bloodline to directly cross that step, so she went to Subai. That's why she started planning all this after entering the world of this story. She thought she was the controller of cause and effect. However, as things continued to develop, Lanlin discovered with horror that she was not actually standing on the path of cause and effect. Outside, but within the cause and effect. Subai actually gave up on the Pixiu bloodline. He even did not hesitate to sacrifice his own blood rank to force out the already fused true blood of Pixiu. For a strengthener, he has to fight hard to improve even a little bit of strength, but Lanlin couldn't figure this out at all, and couldn't figure it out at all. Immediately afterwards, Lanlin seemed to have thought of something and glanced sideways. A blood mark appeared on Subai's chest, and a wisp of blood splashed out and sprinkled on Lanlin's palm. There is no starlight left after Lanlin confirmed, the anger in her eyes could almost turn into raging flames and burn Subai. Why didn't you eat him, why didn't you suck his blood, why? Subai continued to smile. I remember a while ago, when Lanlin asked Subai to be a laborer and Subai to be a chef, her arrogant attitude and look of complete contempt for Subai made Subai very angry at the time, but he still had to smile. Now, Lanlin was very angry, Subai was smiling. This kind of smile feels completely different. Why? Lanlin asked why 3 times in a row. Her mood was almost crazy. Subai's pupils shrank slightly. As a mental patient, he had read a lot of books on psychology before. At the same time, he could be regarded as a doctor after a long illness. He could sense that Lan Lin's mental mood had become tense. Out of control trends. Similar to being obsessed. Are you disappointed that he won't eat my blood? A voice suddenly came from the side lying on the side, and immediately, the door of the side lying on the side was pushed open. Pilalu, who was also wrapped in a bath towel, came out from lying on his side. In his palm, there was a ball of gold, which was the true blood of Pixio that Subai had forced out of his own body. With this blood, Pilalu could find another soul. The beast asked him to inherit the Pixio bloodline again. Lan Lin suddenly turned her head and looked at Piao Tower, with a faint cold light flashing in her eyes. Lan Lin, you have gone crazy. Piao Lu put away the golden ball and said solemnly, stop it. If you continue, you will never come back. And, what do you know? Lan Lin screamed. Her whole mood completely entered a state of hysteria. At the same time, the energy in her body suddenly exploded. Subai fell directly into the wall. A barrier appeared in front of Pilalu, but he could still resist it. It was very difficult. He had rearranged a summoning barrier here, recalled 6 clones from the air and refused them, fabricating the illusion of his own death. However, he also lost too much, and his own strength was only 5 times what it was at its peak. It's not possible. You have to know that even Pilalu in his prime state is probably no match for Lan Lin, let alone him who is already seriously injured at this time. However, when Lan Lin said the word ant, Pilalu's face trembled slightly. Ant? Haha, you treat me and Yan Huiyang as ants? Cough cough cough, it's so ridiculous, Lan Lin, you are really obsessed, you can't see yourself clearly at all, you think you make everything go smoothly according to the cause and effect you think, and everything has its cause. If you let him devour my Pixio and then eat me, will you be able to achieve your goal by eating him again? Lan Lin's long hair floated up, her skin began to turn very pale, and her nails became red. Threads of cause and effect were constantly entangled between her palms and fingers, making her look even more gloomy and cold. This is no longer a sign of a woman's reserve, but a sign of a person's heart filled with extreme emotions, especially since this woman is different from Subai. Subai has become mentally ill and has become a habit, but Lan Lin is not. She is a real person. His understanding of cause and effect has reached the point of obsession. Look back, there's really no need to do this. The 3 of us are not the kind of friends who can back each other up, but at least we don't want to watch you die like this. It's really meaningless to die like that. Shut up, ant. A ball of cold air burst out from Lan Lin's palm, directly wrapping around Piao Lu. Pilai opened his hands on one side of his body. At this time, he was much stronger than when he faced Subai before, but he could only force the cold air out of his body. To put it simply, he only had the power to parry and no counterattack. At this time, Lan Lin, who was completely out of control, showed her true strength almost without reservation. Subai, who had been directly pressed into the wall before, turned into blood and flowed out. However, when he just left the door, he felt a chill behind him. Lan Lin was already standing at the entrance of the corridor, waiting for him. In an instant, Lan Lin appeared in front of Subai, pierced Subai's chest with one hand and lifted Subai up, like a skewer stuck in a bamboo stick. Why? Lan Lin asked hoarsely. Because, ahem, I want to see you unhappy. I don't understand cause and effect, but at least I can control myself and do something. Hearing this answer, Lan Lin became even more angry. If Subai had given a more reasonable reason, Lan Lin might not be so angry. But this man deliberately failed his plan, so he did not hesitate to sacrifice his own strength or even are you willing to throw away everything you have just to piss yourself off? This reason simply made Lan Lin furious. The next moment, 2 fangs appeared at the corners of Lan Lin's mouth, and her eyes turned into the indifferent gray tone that belongs to the vampire race. Even if you haven't fused with Pixio's blood, even if you haven't fused with the starlight in Piaolu's blood, the drop of blood essence seed in your body is actually more than enough for me. It's my fault, I shouldn't have. You are too greedy. Even you now are enough to make up for the fact that I made the wrong choice at the beginning and therefore kept it closed and hidden. Bloodline. With it, I will have no fear at all and use my most perfect bloodline and body to forcibly cross the threshold of cause and effect. You are very beautiful. Blood overflowed from the corner of Sudbai's mouth. Lan Lin frowned slightly. Since you are already so beautiful, stop thinking about being beautiful. Sudbai's blood began to boil, which was a sign of self-destruction. Lan Lin's eyes revealed a look of fear. Fate and cause and effect once again made a big joke with her. I won't take your life, I only want your bloodline, and I can compensate you. I just want to make sure you don't get any farts. There is a sentence that Sudbai didn't say, but there should be another sentence after it, because I am mentally ill. Buzz. At this moment, a hand grabbed Sudbai's shoulder, and at the same time a strong wind pushed Lan Lin away. Yan Huiyang grabbed Sudbai's shoulders and stepped back. At the same time, Yan Huiyang looked at Lan Lin, who had almost turned into a white-haired witch, and slowly said, Lan Lin, haven't you noticed? The consequence of your obsession with this line is that you will continue to benefit the chef who drives the car. If you continue to develop, I'm afraid that you will eventually become his stepping stone. Yan Huiyang returned exactly what Lan Lin had said to him in the car. Sudbai looked at Yan Huiyang, who had just saved him from self-destruction, and whispered, how much hatred you have against her, how cruel. Cause and effect is a cycle, where there is a cause, there is an effect. Lan Lin, who was almost overwhelmed by this fear, heard the words Yan Huiyang return to her. The fear of cause and effect completely overwhelmed her nerves. She raised her hands and raised her head. Ah! A sharp roar came out, and at the same time, her hair turned completely white, her nails turned into dazzling black, her skin also revealed a strange yin-hong, and her entire face kept changing from its usual appearance to vampire appearance, switching between reincarnations. In the pupils, blood gurgled out. The body began to spasm continuously. At last, Lan Lin's body began to decay and decay. The originally beautiful skin turned into dry human skin, and her delicate appearance continued to fade away. The physical body withered and gradually turned into a mummy, and the soul decayed and turned into curls of black smoke. She finally couldn't bear the great fear and lost the courage to survive and continue to face the cause and effect. Her body and soul chose to commit suicide at this time. A seemingly advanced way of committing suicide. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 272. Half of the building looked very messy at this time, with traces of the past ravaged by wind and frost everywhere. Fortunately, no one lived here anymore, and there were not many people in the whole city, so there was no follow-up reaction. Sudbai sat on the steps, panting constantly. His eyes were fixed on the handful of dust below, which was the last trace left by Lan Lin. It's hard to imagine that a woman like that died like this. So unreal, so unexpected. Yan Huiyang walked out, holding a delicate box he found somewhere in his hand. He squatted down on the side of the dust, holding the box in one hand and grabbing the ashes with the other, as if he was making an urn for Lan Lin. Piaolu stood leaning against the wall, his eyes full of loneliness, and his expression looked very desolate. Lan Lin died, a woman who had plotted against all three men here died just like that, but these three men did not have the pleasure of an enemy dying. Instead, there was a special emotion in the air. Just like if the monk or Gyatso died one day, Subai would probably not be very happy. Although the two sides had cheated on each other and cheated each other, maybe this was the way of getting along in the horror broadcast. There would always be such a little sympathy. It's so humming fake. Subai raised his head, held his hair with one hand, breathed a long sigh of relief, and then said, I can't understand it at all, it's too ridiculous, all of this. Yan Huiyang carefully put the last bit of dust into the box, then stood up and looked at Biaolu, you keep it or should I keep it? Let me do it. When I bring her back to the real world, I will find a place with beautiful scenery and set up a barrier so that she will no longer be troubled by things outside. Biaolu was not polite and directly reached out to take the urn. Hey, can't anyone explain? Subai spread his arms and looked at the two men in front of him. For Subai, he really didn't know what happened. Maybe he wasn't tall enough, maybe he wasn't smart enough, but a powerful woman was inexplicably, it was still hard for him to understand and accept that Dick committed suicide like this. Haha. Biaolu suddenly laughed, if it weren't for you, she wouldn't have died. Biaolu pointed at Subai, and you are still asking why now? Subai nodded, and then said, obviously I am ready to die, okay. She has told me so clearly that she is sure of me, and I am also ready. I just do what I think is okay. There are some things I can do to make my death a little more tragic, but now I am not dead, but she is dead, and it was not killed by me, nor by you, nor by him. I want to know who killed her. It was obviously suicide, but Subai still asked who killed him. Obviously, Subai was asking about something deeper, which was Lan Lin's motive for committing suicide. It was fear. It was fear that made her choose death, it was fear that crushed her. Biaolu said, and then looked at Yan Huiyang, also, Lao Yan, your last words became the crushing blow. Lin's last straw. She has gone crazy. There was no guilt on Yan Huiyang's face. Instead, there was only sadness. She has gone crazy. She is no longer the Lan Lin I know. I said that just to she needs to be freed, otherwise, she will completely lose herself and be lost in this story world forever. Stop talking so vainly, can you talk properly? Subai stood up from the steps, touched his pocket, found a box of cigarettes soaked in blood, and pulled out one, he lit it with difficulty, took a strong breath, and emphasized, speak humanly. Yan Huiyang ignored Subai and walked into the room. Pili wanted to leave, but when he looked at Subai, he sighed. He could survive. Although he didn't want to recall it, it was indeed Subai who stopped at that moment. Otherwise, he would have fallen. When you reach a level in the future, you will also encounter the problem we are facing now, that is, whether to go one step further and jump over the dragon's gate, or continue to bury your head in the sand pit and be an ostrich, and continue to be under the threat of terror broadcasts. Survive under pressure. In fact, from the moment she entered the story world, Lan Lin had already seen what would happen next, so she acted according to what she saw. She felt that doing so would allow her to finally achieve the result she wanted. She is sowing her own causes and wants to reap her own fruits. So, not long after entering the story world, she found me and asked me to join forces with her to grab something from Lao Yan. Since I and Lao Yan had some problems with each other, I agreed. After that, Lao Yan was joined by us. I was severely injured and had to hide in a woman's belly to find a chance to heal, and then I met you, right? Subai pursed her lips and pointed at herself, her entire purpose is for me. No, don't think so highly of yourself. What she wants is the blood in your body and the drop of blood you once fused with. Pilalu originally wanted to show off that aloof temperament, but when he thought of his former having been beaten so badly by Subai not long ago, it would be a bit ridiculous to show any superiority to others, so he remained reserved. Then what? Then, you and Lao Yan met, and Lao Yan had a good impression of you. Then you met her while eating. Do you think it was a chance encounter? Do you think you can hide it from her no matter how good you are at hiding it? You think she is really so greedy that she can't bear it and wants to sit at a table with you? She deliberately arranged for you and my Pixio to guard the pile of corpses, and also deliberately stimulated you and humiliated you. The purpose was actually very simple and clear, just to want you to do something. In fact, she has also seen what you are about to do. I know this. She has been controlling me, pushing me to go on the road she wants to see, sucking your true blood. Then you came to the door and became so weak. Everything, it's all too coincidental. But I really don't know that she actually has a simpler and more direct way to accomplish this. For example, when we first met, she had sex with me before we even formed a team, and then she would find an opportunity to trick you to death, and then draw your blood and pixie you. Blood, is it different? A wry smile appeared at the corner of Piaolu's mouth. Cause and effect is a process. She must follow the route she saw. She cannot overstep or skip steps, let alone change on her own initiative. Otherwise, cause and effect will be messed up. Once cause and effect is messed up, she couldn't see clearly. For example, in the real world, many institutions hold ideological education conferences every now and then to talk about the so-called party spirit, talk about fairness and integrity, and talk about serving the people. They themselves support the people who speak at the conference. The people sitting below and listening to the speech, and even the people, all know that these are just things to do if you take off your pants and fart to make trouble, but you have to do it, but you have to do it. This form must continue. Cause and effect, as I understand it, means like this. Take one step and see 3 steps. Even if you are pedantic, even if there seems to be a more convenient way, you have to continue to follow the rules, because this road naturally has its own path. Taking shortcuts and taking other paths may involve other causes and effects, resulting in a situation similar to the butterfly effect. Then why did she commit suicide? Because, when she suddenly realized that she couldn't see the road ahead, and when she found that things that were supposed to develop like that suddenly changed drastically, she felt the great fear that came from cause and effect, from fate. Just like an ordinary person, looking up at the starry sky, you will feel that the starry sky is beautiful, even though it is vast, even though it is boundless, even though he also knows that he is very small, he can still continue to live leisurely and leisurely. However, one day, the starry sky turns into 2 eyes. Outside the starry sky, there is a person so huge that no data can be measured looking at you. The earth you are on is just a particle in that person's eye. When there is dust, can he continue to calmly enjoy the beautiful starry sky every day? This was that big fear. The more she knew, the deeper she felt. Finally, when she found out that she was wrong, the fear she endured would be multiplied countless times. She couldn't bear it anymore, so she chose to end herself. A martyr, Subai said. Martyr? Haha, that's right. Anyway, I don't dare to look at cause and effect anymore. Even if I live my life as a turtle, it's better than enduring that terrible fear. I'm very afraid. Piaolu took one last look at the place where Lan Lin died, turned around, and prepared to enter the room. Subai also sighed and prepared to go in with him. But at this moment, a sharp shout came from the room, followed by a terrifying pressure. Piaolu's expression changed instantly, he opened his hands, the wall disappeared, and the living room appeared directly in front of him. In the living room, a tall cat man with tentacles and a cat face stood there. Yan Huiyang's whole body was wrapped in tentacles. What's even more shocking is that Yan Huiyang, who relies on his physical strength to survive, has no ability to resist these tentacles, and his whole body is tightly restrained. Damn it, have they merged into one so quickly? Piaolu quickly formed a seal with his hands, and a barrier appeared, intending to cut off those tentacles to help Yan Huiyang escape. However, several faces on the giant cat man looked here, their eyes like lightning, blood overflowed from Piaolu's eyes, and the whole person turned out to be He knelt down, his face was red, and his body was trembling, as if he might collapse at any time. 3 tentacles flew in front of Subai, directly tied Subai's legs and waist, and pulled Subai over. Boom! Subai was entangled and lay in front of the Catman. He raised his head vigorously. It just so happened that Catman also had a face on his belly, and this face was looking at him. This is Catwoman's face. At this time, the look on her face seems to say, "See, this time, I am finally able to escape your control, and I can control you." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 273. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. Liao Qiu simply pulled off his soaked clothes and threw them aside, revealing his muscles that were not very well proportioned. Of course, this only meant that he was not the kind of person who likes to train hard in the gym. His figure is still much more attractive than most people in sub-healthy cities today. Yi Mole was still nailed to the deck, and it was obvious that he had not finished the last round of confession. Many people around him were still enduring the pain. Liao Qiu's eyes fell on Su Qing in front of him. Su Qing, her lower abdomen was bleeding continuously, and the blood surrounded her, as if she was performing a kind of sacrifice. Her face was pale, and her breath was very weak. Several times, when even Liao Qiu thought that Su Qing could no longer survive and was about to die, Su Qing actually relied on her terrible perseverance to force herself through. After a while, Yi Mole finished his confession, and the nails on his body disappeared. He slowly sat up, breathing heavily. He was obviously very tired and mentally exhausted. "Lao Lei, do you feel it?" Liao Qiu suddenly looked at Yi Mole and whispered. Yi Mole nodded. "Boat. Noah's Ark. Is falling. You're not good again." Subai looked at this familiar face and said calmly. The Catman's tentacles directly threw Subai heavily to the ground. Subai's whole body passed through the floor and was thrown through the beams. Then, he was hung there by the tentacles. The whole person was covered in cement dust. Shaking his head and taking a deep breath to bring his dizzy thoughts back, Subai looked at the Catman in front of him. He didn't know what to say or what he needed to say. Yan Huiyang was suppressed tightly, and Pilai Tower itself could not protect itself. Both of them were seriously injured, and their strength was greatly reduced. Lan Lin, who was originally a powerful figure, also fell. So, when the final Catman form appeared, what seemed like a sure thing was now overturned. Dear listeners, hello, I am the host of the show. I don't have a name, because the name here has no meaning at all. First of all, I am happy to share with you the news that this team mode test was basically a success, and the data to be obtained and the calculations that will be carried out in the future have basically been completed. As a program supporter of Horror Broadcast, please allow me, on behalf of all the Horror Broadcast staff, to express my utmost gratitude and my most sincere greetings to all of you for your labor, hard work, and of course, life, in participating in this test. Many people died during the test, but I believe that the names of those who died will also be forgotten forever. For the old order to be replaced by a new one, the former must completely perish. So, here is the last note of this story world. The final main mission. Survive for 3 hours. Why does the horror radio host's speech feel so much more alive than before? Even at this time, Subai still had the mind to think about this. It seems that since the last 3 months of rectification and suspension of broadcasts, horror broadcasts have changed in many aspects. The most obvious and easiest to access that's the host's voice. Moreover, it seems that horror broadcasts will not stop trying new things, but they will no longer produce characters similar to the convenience store owner and the devil in the painting of the Taoist law field as before. So after the official establishment, before creating this similar story world, we must first conduct a test collection report. But, what does the last note mean? The huge Catman was not in a hurry to kill Yan Huiyang, nor did it kill Piao Lu, nor did it kill Subai. It seemed to be interested in throwing Subai around, but it just stood there quietly. Over there. Seem. What are you waiting for? At this time, Subai suddenly felt that it seemed that he had really made a mistake by not boarding Noah's Ark. Whether it was the so-called cause and effect game between Lan Lin, Yan Huiyang, and Piao Lu or the current reaction of the Catman, I can't sense it or understand it. It's really boring to stay down there by myself. Of course, this is because Subai doesn't know what kind of life those who successfully boarded Noah's Ark lived. If he knew, his thoughts would probably be different. The Catman controlled the three people and kept them motionless. Immediately, Subai seemed to sense something and raised his head. A layer of dark clouds is descending, as if the sky is empty and falling. Slowly, the dark clouds faded away, revealing its true appearance. A wooden boat slipped from the sky at a very fast speed, carrying a terrifying pressure, as if God's will was added to it. The boat has fallen. Subai pursed his lips. Immediately afterwards, the giant Catman did not choose to avoid or escape, because it knew that as long as it was here, it had no chance or room to escape. Instead, it chose a proactive attitude and jumped directly. He got up and rushed towards Noah's Ark. By the way, Subai, Yan Huiyang, and Piao Lu, who were bound by the tentacles, were also taken along. Yan Huiyang finally opened his eyes at this moment. Rune marks appeared on his body, and his aura suddenly increased. Pilalu's hair spread out, his eyes released the light of the stars, and a huge hexagonal light flashed in the air, directly receiving the power from the stars. The plan of the giant Catman is to take these three people to climb Noah's Ark together. One more person will bring more strength. The strength of these three people is already considered the best in this almost deserted city. With Noah's Ark destroyed, they couldn't help but fight to the death to add strength to themselves. However, the dream is very full, but the reality is so skinny. Yan Huiyang and Piao Lu, two people who can be considered old-fashioned, actually chose to save their strength from the beginning. They knew that after losing Lan Lin and being severely traumatized, they would not be able to get along with the fully formed cat. The humans resisted, and the Catman never killed anyone, so it gave them the opportunity to wait for an opportunity. At this moment, these two old fritters planned to leave and break away from the cat people. They did not dare to resist the strife of Noah's Ark. Damn it, why are these two guys not as stupid as Lan Lin before? Subai couldn't help but feel a little disgusted in his heart. If Yan Huiyang and Piao Lu were still dead but not stiff, then Subai was broken now. His blood was broken, his body was seriously injured, and he was extremely weak. He wanted to fight and fight. Even if I scream, I feel powerless. At this moment, a cold chill suddenly came from Subai's ring. This is a set of jewelry from Frozen Man. Half of it is with him and half with Catwoman. But now it is obvious that in order to speed up the fusion into the final form, the last dozen cat people directly chose to fuse together. Since Catwoman can choose to send herself a message, it proves that she still has her own sanity. In the final attack, Yan Huiyang and Piao Lu finally broke free from the shackles of the cat people and separated. Subai continued to be grabbed and accelerated towards the bottom of Noah's Ark with the giant Catman. At this moment, the two tentacles holding Subai relaxed slightly, making Subai feel that he could break away and escape if he wanted to. After hesitating for 2 seconds, Subai gritted his teeth and exerted force on his body. He actually broke free. His whole body began to fall downwards. The other two tentacles came to grab Subai. As a result, Subai turned into a pool of blood and hid. After passing the restraint, the two tentacles on the left also came down. It broke directly next to Subai, cutting off the connection between himself and the combination. Subai's blood condensed into a human shape in mid-air, and he fell down holding the two tentacles. The city below was completely a sea of fire, and huge whirlwinds kept sweeping across the place. And that combination, that huge catman that still condensed a dozen of the last catmen, ran into Noah without hesitation. Ark. They are going to be exterminated and exterminated, but they actually think that they are human beings. Their fate has made them like this, and God, terrorist broadcast, has made them like this. They have no choice but to turn their final unwillingness into this final collision. It's quite like Deng Xishang's original order to sink Yoshino. Both of them are full of unwillingness and no hesitation. Boom! A huge roar came. The huge catman's body turned into a fireball, hit Noah's Ark and dispersed. Noah's Ark was cut in half and began to fall. It was visible to the naked eye that many listeners began to take the initiative to use their own weapons from the falling Noah's Ark. Method to jump out in advance, but there are still many ordinary people and animals in Noah's Ark. The audience has enough methods and abilities to escape from the crash airliner, but those ordinary people and animals, those who represent the so-called will of God, those lives that symbolize new life, are obviously unable to escape their bad luck. Boom! Subai fell into a river holding two tentacles. About half a minute later, Subai climbed up. The two tentacles floated on the river, merged together, and turned into a kitten. The kitten emerged from the river. He came upstream, crawled to Subai's side wetly, rubbed on Subai's legs, and then licked Subai's palm. Subai smiled and reached out to touch the kitten's head. The kitten looked very happy. But next moment, Subai started to exert strength with both hands, pinched the kitten's neck and began to exert force, hard, non-stop, hard. The kitten showed pain and pleading, but when he saw that Subai showed no mercy, the kitten's face showed the resentful face of a woman who was unfamiliar to Subai. Why did you find out that I'm not her? Why? How could that stupid girl who kept talking to me about fate and race before deliberately cooperate with me to escape together? She would just continue to crash into the ship stupidly. After a while, the kitten died, lost its vitality, and lay motionless in front of Subai. Subai sat on the ground, holding the river beach with both hands. In front of him was a sea of fire. One thing, Subai didn't know whether it was the catwoman who deliberately let him go or the greedy catman who wanted to stay with him and get through. Perhaps. I will never have the chance to figure this out. Last time I told you about the ancient fresh story I planned to write, called Peach Blossom Spring, an ancient supernatural horror story. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 274. The reason why the test mission world was created by Terror Broadcast was to test the team formation process, find out the gaps and make corrections. Therefore, this kind of story world is inevitably a bit too rigid, and everything is not for the sake of the plot. Service, but service for data. Maybe Terror Broadcasting thinks that the data has been collected, and then look at the three people who were originally arranged to come in with a strength that is much stronger than most of the listeners. They are all injured, dead, and unable to deal with it. In the final situation, we simply let Noah's Ark come down and crush it, bringing this story world to an end. Subai himself had not yet recovered from Lan Lin's sudden death. After some troubles, he discovered that the story world had ended. 3 hours, actually very quickly, Subai strangled the kitten to death and sat by the river the whole time without looking for other listeners, and no other listeners came to Subai. Subai didn't know whether Suqing was dead or not. Subai didn't know whether the other people he knew or didn't know were still alive, and he didn't want to know. He needs time and quiet to slowly digest what he has seen and felt before. Lan Lin and the others are existences on another level to Subai. Subai is still far away from them. They are not in a circle of strength. People, if they insist on getting together, they can't play at all, because the status of both parties is not equal. The word peng of a friend is just 2 strings of equal money. A gust of cool breeze blew, and Subai suddenly found himself sitting in a cafe. Outside, was the gate of his community. In front of him, there was a cup of coffee, still steaming. "Are you back?" Sudbai took out a tissue and wiped his face, then crumpled the tissue into a ball and held it in his hand. "If we are not crazy anymore, we will all grow old. If we are not crazy anymore, we will all change, become sad, become sentimental, become destitute." This song was playing in the cafe. Sudbai supported his chin with both hands, his eyes lost in reminiscence. Listening to this song, Sudbai was not thinking about himself, but about the powerful woman who committed suicide in front of him. Someone as strong as Lan Lin can commit suicide out of fear. What does that thing called cause and effect feel like? Sudbai's brows sank deeply, and then an excited smile appeared on his face. Something that can drive Lan Lin to despair and commit suicide. I really think about it too. Go and experience it. That must be exciting. Rubbing his chin vigorously, Sudbai really felt that he was really seriously ill. Lan Lin's incident not only did not make him despair, but made him yearn for it. He really wanted to improve his strength to that level all at once. And then experience that great fear. After walking out of the cafe, Sudbai walked towards his neighborhood. The scenery in the community is nice, and the greening is very exquisite. The two security guards at the door saluted together when they saw Sudbai entering. Sudbai used to drive back, so he really didn't pay attention to this detail, so he immediately saluted the two security guards. Which also amused the two security guards. What they did was in accordance with the company's rules and regulations and was monitored by cameras. Walking all the way to his villa, Sudbai took out his cell phone, looked at the date, and found that it wasn't long before the house was handed over. It was really time for him to consider moving. Qin Yang from Qinhuangdao drove a taxi to support his family just so that his family no longer had to bear his misfortune. This time, Sudbai really saw the power of cause and effect from Lan Lin. It's scary, and I really don't want the little guy to follow his own path again when he grows up. Perhaps, his parents did not expect that the inheritance they left behind would have such an impact on their son, or maybe they did, but they left in such a hurry and had no time to think about it. If his parents are the audience, Sudbai is really not sure whether his parents are alive or dead now. Of course, Sudbai doesn't care about this very much. Sudbai is used to losing his parents. Even if they appear in front of Sudbai now, Sudbai walked over and called his parents naturally and calmly, without bursting into tears and holding his head while crying. After swiping the door card and pushing open the door, Sudbai saw the little guy sleeping on the sofa and Jixiang lying on the blanket in the living room. When Sudbai came in, Jixiang opened his eyes and looked at Sudbai, and then licked his paws. He was not excited at all. The relationship between Sudbai and the cat was already very weak. Maybe Jixiang was still cursing secretly in his heart. Why hasn't this annoying person died in the story world yet? He walked to the sofa and sat down gently. The little guy was sucking his thumb and sleeping soundly. His body exuded the milky fragrance of a baby. Sudbai leaned down, kissed the little guy's forehead gently, and then gently rubbed the tip of his nose with his own. Only by facing him could Sudbai feel a moment of peace. He is not his own flesh and blood, but he is the deepest softness in his heart. If I don't have the time or the responsibility to love a girl, at least I can now do my best to love you, my son. The little guy was very excited sitting in the passenger seat of Pusa. Although he was small, he was very smart. He could sense from Sudbai's actions that he was about to move. For a child, changing to a new environment is always a good idea. It was something that made him feel happy and fresh. Ji Xiang was lying on the back seat, looking a little lazy. He knew what Sudbai was going to do and why Sudbai was doing it, but as a pampered cat, he always felt uncomfortable leaving this villa with an independent garden. Somewhat sad, the cat's life is dark. Sudbai dragged out the two suitcases and put them in Pusa's trunk. Then he got into the car, started the car, and drove out of the community. From now on, Subalian's last place belongs to him. The family property was also cut off. Driving to a parking lot called VIP building, the little guy hugged Subai's neck, and Subai took the elevator directly to the 14th floor with the suitcase in both hands. On this floor, there are small offices rented out individually. There are many companies settled in them. Most companies may only have 3 or 4 employees, but the general manager, deputy general manager and so on are also fully equipped. Subai walked to a room with a sign of private detective agency and opened the door with the key. The first room after entering was an office. There was another door behind the office, which contained a bedroom and a small kitchen. Subai was not a pedantic person. He didn't really spend all his money. Instead, he renovated and bought the place first, and then kept part of the living expenses. Subai had also calculated these expenses himself. After a while, when he made money, he would give the money away. In this way, he could be regarded as parting ways with his previous property. It may be a bit self-deceiving, but at least it is Subai's intention. The little guy is a poor person who came out of the story world. Subai doesn't want him to return to the story world when he grows up. Putting the little guy on the bed and letting him watch cartoons on his tablet, Subai sat back on the sofa in the office, shaking a can of beer in his hand and drinking silently. From a rich young man to his current fame, it didn't sound like it was. It sounds like a very good private detective. Subai doesn't think there is much difference. For the audience, this kind of thing is really nothing to care about. Especially Lan Lin's death made Subai open up a lot of things. In the last story world, Subai played with several people whose strength completely overwhelmed him, which made Subai experience for a long time the feeling that it doesn't matter if you lose one of your lives, but I can't make you get what you want even if I die. This feeling, perhaps this is a reflection of Subai's current state of mind. He could throw away his life at any time, and he didn't really care. On the one hand, he lived to take care of the little guy, and on the other hand, he lived to experience excitement and fear, not just to survive. After drinking a bottle of beer, Subai took out his mobile phone and prepared to call Chu Zhao. The relationship between him and Chu Zhao was a bit awkward now, but fortunately, they both talked about it last time. The relationship was not as close as before, but at least it was still good. A friend, Chu Zhao, who was also the leader in the police station, helped introduce him. Subai was not worried that his private detective agency would be out of business. Whether it was in China or abroad, it was indeed necessary to find connections to do things. The public account Kongbu 66 sent a message. Subai was a little surprised. He had already checked the rewards for the last mission in the story world. When I clicked it and took a look, it actually predicted that I would enter the next story world in a month if nothing unexpected happened. This official account has become more and more user-friendly and convenient. Subai opened the address book and was about to make a call when the doorbell rang outside. Subai pressed the button on the table and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open. A middle-aged man in a blue suit walked in. He looked very majestic and should be a successful person. I noticed that the sign has been hanging here for a long time. Today I heard from my subordinates that this detective agency finally has someone, so I came over to pay a visit, which is also a way to visit the neighbors. This is my business card. Subai took the business card. Of course, Subai didn't believe that this person was here to visit. There were so many small companies here, why did he pay attention to this newly opened detective agency and come to visit? Moreover, do you think this is a neighborhood in an old Beijing alley? Xiezhen, a very dignified name, is the deputy general manager of Glacier Network Company. This company is located on the entire 15th floor here. At the same time, there are several offices of theirs on the floor where Subai is located. It is considered a relatively famous company. A well-known online game development company, which owns several games such as Expedition OL, dragon warrior and invincible legend. Subai sometimes sees these advertisements from time to time when browsing the web. They are very popular. Subai opened a box on his desk, took out his business card from the box and handed it over. Then he played with the gold-rimmed and lightly scented business card and asked, "Is the background of this card a peach blossom garden?" In the background, there are colorful fallen flowers, luxuriant grass, and a row of houses, giving people a fresh and natural feeling. Exactly, Xie nodded. Personally, I think it is very unlucky to print the peach blossom land background on a business card. Oh, Xie sat down on the table opposite Subai. I'm all ears. Zhou Dunyi once said that articles are used to convey the Tao, which means that articles are used to convey ideas. Long believes that the stories, plots, characters, etc. in novels are all designed to highlight a theme, or an atmosphere. The plot and the atmosphere and ideas to be expressed need to complement each other. The plot in the past 2 days has caused a lot of controversy. This is the problem of Long, because Long cannot perfectly and harmoniously express what he wants to express with a suitable plot and fit. The plot is highlighted, so some readers will feel unbalanced. This is also the space and direction for Long to continue to progress and improve in the future. No gold is barefoot, and no one is perfect. Long will never say that the books he writes will be perfect. In fact, every time he looks back at the previous plots, he always feels I feel that there are many shortcomings. In some places, if I rewrite it again, I can grasp it better and write it more naturally or more compactly and wonderfully. But after all, online novels are something that must be updated every day. There is no way for Long to learn from Feng Guo and Banana to slowly carve out his own plots and ideas every week or even every month. Xiao Long is also a human being, and there will be certain when you are low on energy or inspiration for a few days. The plots in those days may be far-fetched, blunt, watery, awkward, or below the average level of Xiaolong's books, but these are not Long's original intentions. It's not the dragon's intention. I also hope that you guys can be more tolerant. No matter how good an athlete is, there will be times when he is not in good condition and makes mistakes in the game. What's more, as a writer, Xiaolong is coding every day, which is equivalent to being in the game every day and being inspected by everyone, especially if the protagonist of Long is not the popular story about a young boy who was slapped in the face and worked hard to become stronger is actually a story about mental illness. Every day, I put myself into the mind of the mentally ill protagonist to conceive the plot. Long is almost neurotic, he. Having said so much nonsense, I just want to tell you one thing. This is the first update today, it breaks out today. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiao Long. Chapter 275. Since Mr. Xie printed the background image of the peach blossom spring on his business card, he obviously loves Tao Yuanming's The Peach Blossom Spring. Subai wanted to pour a cup of tea, but found that he had planned and prepared the rest of the room, but he missed the tea leaves for the guests because Subai himself had no habit of drinking tea. Very simply, Subai took out 2 bottles of orange juice and handed one of them to Xie. Don't mind. On the first day you move here, you won't be ready for many things. It's okay. I'll ask the secretary to come down and deliver a can of good tea to Mr. Su later. Subai smiled and ignored the problem. It was definitely not for his own business to come to him. Otherwise, there would be no need to go directly to the detective office downstairs of his company with such a big fanfare. He should be entrusted by others or wanted to check some things that are not closely related to you. It is just a social habit of businessmen to get close to you. Ji Zhen took the orange juice in his hand and continued, of course I know the story of Peach Blossom Spring very well, and I have the full text in my mind. After all, I am a person in the business world, so it is natural that intrigues are inevitable in my daily life. So after living like this for a long time, I yearn for the beautiful world in peach blossom spring more and more. It can be regarded as a kind of spiritual sustenance. Of course, I am being pretentious. Mr. Su said that it is unlucky to print the background of peach blossom spring on a business card. I would like to hear the details. Subai took a sip of orange juice and said, "It's actually very simple. Just interpret it from a different perspective. Peach blossom spring seems to describe a very beautiful fictional world, but in some details, it adds a little bit of personal evil. If you speculate subjectively in a fun way, it can completely change its meaning." Well, I'm very interested in Mr. Su's bad taste. First of all, a fisherman makes a living by fishing. He is a fisherman. In ancient times, an industry was often passed down from generation to generation. It is very likely that the fisherman's father was also a fisherman. Therefore, the fisherman should pay close attention to the area around him. The water area is very familiar. After all, he is fishing in the river, not the sea. If he is fishing in the sea, there will naturally be many unknowns, but in the river, the possibility of a local fisherman getting lost should be minimal. Bar. Continue. After the fisherman arrived at the source, he saw the entrance of the cave. It was extremely narrow at first, and then it was accessible to people. After walking for dozens of steps, it suddenly became clear. The land was flat and the houses looked like it. If you think about the scene from another angle, you can changing the scene. Is the fisherman entering a cave or a tomb passage? It is extremely narrow at first, and only then can it pass people. After walking dozens of steps, it suddenly becomes clear. Isn't what is described here the conventional construction idea of ancient tomb passage design? The land is flat and the houses are so neat and orderly. We know that ancient cities were indeed planned very carefully, and every place and every line was meticulous, but these are all big cities. For example, on the maps of old Beijing and old Xi'an, there are lines and rules everywhere. They are very strict and cannot go beyond the rules. However, the fisherman did not go to a big city at that time, nor was it a major military town. He went to a peach blossom garden, and Peach Blossom Garden was actually a small village. As far as I know, the villages of the ancients did not seem to be so particular. The houses in the village are basically built in an intricate style around the ancestral hall. So, what do you mean, what do these "the land is flat and the houses are like" recorded by Tao Yuanming refer to? Subai smiled and took another sip of orange juice. In ancient China, there was one thing that was bigger than anything else, and that was tombs. There were many rules for tombs, and the ancients also attached great importance to them. The construction of tombs often had rules that are stricter than living inhabited by living people. If it is too unrealistic to describe a small mountain village with flat land and scattered houses, then if it is used to describe neatly repaired tombs, wouldn't it fit perfectly? What's up? No matter how bad the conditions are, people would not dare to be vague about repairing graves. Xie Zhen nodded. Mr. Su, I am becoming more and more interested in your ideas. Please continue. Is there anything else? The word qian was sometimes used to describe tomb passages in ancient times. This is more proof of my previous speculation. At the same time, the period when bamboos and mulberries are most luxuriant is May and July. And peach blossom is March. There is a huge time fallacy here. There are fertile fields, beautiful ponds, mulberry and bamboo species. This sentence has great ambiguity and contradiction with the peach blossom spring. Of course, there is also a poem about the peach blossoms beginning to bloom in Jinshan Temple in April, but this is related to the altitude and climate, and fishermen cannot climb mountains with fishing boats. Not realistic. Therefore, I think the real way for the fisherman to enter the peach blossom land is this: he saw a place full of peach blossoms in full bloom, and then saw a tomb passage. He bent down and walked in. The tomb passage was narrow at first and then widened, and then suddenly opened up and saw the tombs deep in the tomb passage have been neatly repaired. Then if we follow Mr. Su's explanation, how can we explain that the yellow hair is so content and the men and women are dressed like outsiders? Xie Zhen asked. There are people here. Subai lowered his head, brought his face very close, and then deliberately lowered his voice and asked. So, what looks exactly like a person but isn't a person? Ji Zhen's face suddenly darkened, he took a deep breath and spit out one word, ghost. Yes, ghosts. When the fisherman entered the tomb passage and saw the neat tombs, he also saw a group of ghosts. Subai took out 2 cigarettes and handed one to Xie Zhen. Xie Zhen shook his head to indicate that he didn't want to. While smoking, Subai lit it himself. Men and women are dressed like outsiders. Since Yun's ancestors escaped from the chaos of the Qin dynasty, he led his wife's people to come to this desperate situation. He never came back, so he was separated from outsiders. Asked what time it is now, but I don't know that there was a Han dynasty, regardless of the Wei and Jin dynasties. First of all, I don't know very well what people's clothes were like during the Qin dynasty, but the Qin dynasty fell in 206 BC. Although I don't remember the general existence time of the Eastern Jin dynasty very clearly, it was probably between 300 and 300 AD. Between 400 years, it means that there is a difference of 5 to 600 years. The styles of clothing in ancient times cannot change from time to time like they do now, but 5 to 600 years is enough time for several earth-shaking changes in clothing to occur. But isn't it strange that the people in the peach blossom spring dress like outsiders, both men and women? Why is this happening? First, it's a sacrifice. Someone outside has been burning paper money or clothes made of paper for them. Second, it may be a ghost's ability to make you see what you think you should see. Moreover, for 500 or 600 years, the people in Peach Blossom Spring did not communicate with the outside world, and they have been marrying close relatives there. I think Mr. Xie, you should be very clear about the consequences of incestuous marriage for 500 to 600 years, so, this logically speaking, this description is actually Tao Yuanming telling people who read this article that the people in Peach Blossom Spring are not people at all. Of course, the difference in accent is also a big doubt. There was no Mandarin in ancient times. The fisherman may have been confused, or he may have been coerced. It was written in the article that the people in the Peach Blossom Spring entertained the fishermen by wine, killing chickens, and cooking food. This description is very interesting and very interesting. It is easy to think of another picture, which is a custom that is still retained in many rural areas in China, that is, doing white things and placing sacrifices. Maybe, the fishermen kept eating sacrifices during those days, maybe even eating meat, maggots and insects. This can explain that after the people in the Peach Blossom Spring told the fishermen that it was not enough for outsiders, the fishermen went to report to the prefect as soon as they left. Many Chinese teachers said that the fishermen were greedy for rewards, but they found that a small village levied more taxes and rewards. A lot. Is the benefit huge? So, what is the reason that makes the fisherman start to mark everything as soon as he leaves the Peach Blossom Spring, and then goes straight to the prefect's mansion? Xie Zhen continued Sudbai's words, because the fisherman may have realized that he encountered a ghost village. He may have realized it after leaving, or he may have discovered it while he was inside, so he hurriedly reported it to the prefect. Went. Also, peach trees have the function of warding off evil spirits and suppressing evil spirits. The magic weapon used by many Taoist priests to exorcise evil spirits and protect the Tao is the peachwood sword. The purpose of the village surrounded by peach trees is also obvious. Furthermore, Tao Yuanming only loved chrysanthemums. If he really wanted to write about a purely imaginary beautiful world, why not write it as a chrysanthemum village? In ancient times, there was no habit of comparing chrysanthemums to certain organs of the human body, so there is nothing to avoid. In that case, According to your thinking, there is a paragraph at the end of the article. Luzaji of Nanyang, a noble scholar, heard about it and went there happily. However, he failed to find the disease and ended up with no one interested in him. Could it be explained that because it is a ghost village, no one can find it? Subai shook his head. Actually, if I think about it on a deeper level, I think Luzaji really found the peach blossom spring, but the prefect did not find it. Why? Xiezhen asked. If Peach Blossom Spring is really a ghost village, and the fisherman's entry is actually an irreversible chance coincidence, then, normally, what kind of person can go to that ghost village full of ghosts? Ji Zhen took out a tissue and wiped his hands. He wanted to wipe his sweat, but he still controlled it. Luzaji died and became a ghost, so he successfully entered the Peach Blossom Spring. That's it? Actually, your explanation is far-fetched, Xiezhen said, but I still decided to change my business card to a different style. Subai shrugged. I think so too, I just think it's fun. You know, if you open a detective agency, if you don't know how to be mysterious, you won't be able to scare customers into paying for orders. Xiezhen put down a USB flash drive on the table. This is something I want to ask Mr. Su to help me investigate. There is information in it. If Mr. Su is willing to take it after reading it, I can pay a 30% deposit in advance contacting via phone. After saying that, Xiezhen left. Subai held the USB flash drive with a smile on his lips. On the first day when he changed from a wealthy young man to a wage earner, business came to his door. I really have to thank Tao Yuanming for writing that ghost story. The dragon has gone to sleep. The next chapter will be updated in the late afternoon. I have been writing all night and I need to catch up on some sleep. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 276. Subai inserted the USB flash drive into the computer. The laptop on the table was also newly equipped, and the driver was being installed on the USB flash drive. At this moment, Subai's cell phone rang, and the call prompt was Chu Zhao. After answering the phone, the voice on Chu Zhao's side was rather noisy. It should have been from the office. Chu Zhao's office was naturally much more popular than Subai's. Although their professions were somewhat similar, private detective in today's China, well, even in the world, they are dark characters who are not easy to see the light of day. Chu Zhao is now considered a popular figure in the police station. It seems that he vents all the pressure in the story world. My real-world job went up. We won't even notify you when we open. Chu Zhao yawned. It was obvious that he hadn't slept very well recently. I've been exhausted from investigating a big case in the past 2 days. I was planning to contact you and ask you to help introduce some business. That's no problem. I can also arrange you to play a role similar to that of an auxiliary police officer. I have a big-name listener like you to help me investigate the case. It's not too late for me to be happy. Big boss figure? Subai smiled a little. Perhaps, in the eyes of Chu Zhao and Sunur, he was indeed considered a relatively powerful audience. Maybe this was the reason why he saw different things when he stood at different heights. Anyway, Subai had felt the fear of being dominated by a truly strong person for a long time in the previous story world. Well, how about Sunur and I go to your place for a party tonight? The three of us haven't gotten together for a long time. Sunur has suspended his official duties and now lives outside. He has also lost contact with his family. It should be her behavior is unacceptable to the family. Okay, welcome. Well, okay, that's it? You don't have to worry about business matters. There must be some. To be honest, I admire you very much. Although for us listeners, it is true that we don't care much about money, but like you, abandoning all the previous actions like this is really a bit of a B category where money is like dirt. Okay, see you tonight. Well, see you tonight. After hanging up the phone, Subai saw that the USB flash drive had been read. He clicked it and found a folder inside. There were several Word documents and some pictures in the folder. Subai's previous guess was correct. This case was indeed not the one he was asked to investigate. He was just running errands for others. The main person in the investigation was the female secretary of another deputy general manager. It is very likely that this deputy general manager, the manager, wants to investigate his secretary. Subai didn't know what other twists and turns there were, and he didn't bother to find out. The request for this order was very simple, that is, let Subai monitor the female secretary to see if she had any secrets. Personal relationship. Judging from the photos, the female secretary does have a good figure, her face is somewhat pretty with makeup, and she has a beauty mark at the corner of her mouth. Subai imported all this information into his mobile phone, and then dialed the number with Xie Zhen's business card, which was Xie Zhen's private number. Hey, Mr. Su, have you finished reading the information? I took the call and will give you news in about 3 days. Of course, that's if something really happens to her. Okay, I will ask my secretary to hand over the deposit to you later. Okay, by the way, what time does your company usually get off work? It's hard to say for sure, because as you know, in online game companies, overtime is the norm. Not working overtime means that the company is about to go downhill. Okay, that's it? I believe you, Mr. Su, or I believe the ghost story you told. Thanks. See you soon. I'll wait for your good news. After hanging up the phone, Subai lit up a cigarette. Subai didn't take this matter too seriously. This was the real world. The people who issued the mission were relief reports, not terror broadcasts. There was no need for him to be nervous. We have seen so many scenes, this is where we are. Subai didn't prepare some of the equipment commonly used by private detectives, because to Subai, those things seemed a bit useless. He himself had abilities beyond ordinary people, and Subai was not really so extreme that he didn't even have his own special abilities. Use. Back in the bedroom, the little guy was leaning on Ji Xiang's body and playing with Ji Xiang's tail. Seeing Subai coming, the little guy immediately crawled over to Subai. After lying on the bed with the little guy for a while, Subai took the induction cooker to cook. I ordered some curry, served it with rice, and had a simple meal with the little guy. Seeing that it was already evening, Subai kissed the little guy's head, put on his windbreaker, and went downstairs. Went directly to the underground parking lot of this building. The information given by Ji Zhen was very detailed, including the family relationship of the female secretary named Lunana and other details. Subai drove directly and used the map navigation on his mobile phone for about half an hour to find Lunana's residence. Lunana's residence is an old-fashioned apartment that looks obviously old. It stands to reason that if she is really a manager's lover, she shouldn't have to rent here. Lunana is not a native of Shanghai, but from Zhejiang. So the possibility that Lunana bought this house is not high. On the one hand, as a relatively young woman, even if she wants to buy a house in Shanghai, a place where land is very expensive, she should not choose this old community. Subai parked the car and went directly to Lunana's home. Lunana probably wasn't off work right now, and there was probably no one at home. The window in her house was not closed, so Subai climbed in through the window easily. In this old community, there are only 2 old men guarding the door in the guard room, and there are no other security measures. The house is very messy. Many urban white-collar workers are like this now. They look very glamorous on the outside, but in their own homes they look very sloppy. Underwear and takeout boxes were scattered everywhere, the house was in a mess, and there was also the smell of sour food. Subai frowned slightly, looked around, and found nothing special. This place is originally a living place for single women, with simple accommodation. There is not even the slightest trace of men's activities here. There are no cigarette butts, no men's socks, and no men's slippers. Sudbai simply sat down on the chair on the balcony. It seemed that some of his ideas were too simple, and he was a little too eager to achieve success. Taking out his mobile phone and casually browsing the news, Sudbai kept passing the time until about 9 o'clock in the evening. Finally, there was the sound of a key being inserted at the door. Sudbai got up and found a place to hide. Lunana came back from get off work. She first sat on the sofa and took off her clothes, shoes, and socks. Then she took a glass of Coke and sat there to drink it. After about half an hour, she went to the bathroom to take a shower. She took a shower very quickly, 5 minutes. The time came out, and then he went straight into the bedroom naked without even wearing pajamas, probably to go to bed. Sudbai walked to the door of the bedroom, turned into blood and dripped in, passed through the door quietly, and flowed directly to the bedside. At this time, Lunana was playing with her mobile phone on the bed for a while. She was probably tired and ready to rest, so she put her mobile phone on the bedside table and went to sleep with the quilt on her side. Sudbai had no interest in this naked body. He regrouped his body, picked up the phone that was still on but didn't automatically lock the screen, and started browsing some of Lunana's social software. The chat records in QQ and WeChat are very simple. Lunana does not have many friends with whom she often chats, and most of them are colleagues, and there are no flirty words. This woman seems to be working and working all the time, and she does not have much social circle. For such a simple and transparent woman, why did Xie Zhen entrust him with the investigation? She doesn't look like a commercial spy or the kind of mistress who would cheat on someone. At this time, Lunana suddenly moved. Sudbai took out the phone, put it back where it was, and then squatted down. Lunana's bed was a rather tacky princess-style high bed. Sudbai was squatting at the end of the bed. There was a relatively large railing that could perfectly block Lunana's view, and Lunana did not leave a light on to sleep. Habit, so the visibility in the bedroom is not high. Lunana touched the phone first, and Sudbai felt the light on the phone came on for a while, and then went out again. Then, Lunana opened the bedside table again and found something else. Buzz buzz. A high-frequency vibrating sound came, and Sudbai looked confused as to what it was. Then, Sudbai seemed to have thought of something and thought, no way. There should be another update tonight. Don't panic, hold on tight to the dragon.